Okay, this is going to be a tutorial, a C++ tutorial on how to read a text file into your C++ program. There are many ways to do this, many methods, so I'll be doing a couple different versions in the future. This is one method I used recently on a project I had for one of my software engineering classes, and I'm actually breaking out the part. It was a complicated program where you had to create multiple functions, and one of the functions was reading in data from a text file. It was a parts text file, and then from there you manipulate the data. So we'll just do the just reading in the file into your C++ project. So first you need an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. I'm using Visual Studio 2019, and I'll go ahead and create a new project. And this is brand new, so I'm going to be creating it from scratch. So if I have any hiccups or anything goes wrong, you guys will see, which I like seeing whenever I watch tutorials. I think it helps because you see the person troubleshoot just like you would in the real world when you run into issues. You know, things don't always go out perfect. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create my project here. What I did was I created a blank C++ project, and I'm going to dump it in a folder that I'm using for my for this channel. So it is here, and what we will call this will be reading in file method 1. I don't know. I was taking a class tutorial, so anytime you're working with C++, try not to use any spaces, blank spaces in your file structure. It will sometimes throw off the C++ compilation. So I've just used underscores. I have not. I've had issues where I have used file spaces, and the compiler will bitch at me about the blank spaces. So I've always used underscore in my file structure. Pretty old school, but C++ is old school, so does not get okay. Oh, sorry, I'm just selecting folder here, and this is where we'll actually name it. Reading in file method 1. Go and create. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our source file here. So I'm going to right click here, add, and this is going to be a C++ file. So we want this .cpp. We're not doing a header file or class, just a simple C++. So we'll call it something simple. Read in file method 1. Go and add. So, sorry, I have kids in the background. So I'll be doing a full series on doing complete C++ and why we do certain items. I'm just kind of breaking out different things you'll want to learn, I guess. So we'll need to include some header files. So hashtag include. We're going to use FStream. And then actually for to read in files, you'll need something called FStream. So you need to include that header file. And then I don't want to put the standard tag on everything, so I'll be using namespace standard. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and construct our main file, or our entry point for our file. Okay, and then the big piece about reading in this file is you will actually let me grab it real quick. So you want to find the folder where your file will be located at. So here's the file structure where I put my CPP file. You can see the read-in file method 1.cpp. So what we'll want to do is grab whatever text file we're using. This one is actually called Parse, and I'll put it in the same file folder. If not, you'll see later that you'll need to put dashes to get to where that file structure is in your system. But we'll go ahead and get started. So let me bring up the text file real quick. So as you can see, this was a parts file for a class that I was using. This is like a part identifier, I guess. This was like the class of the part. This, I think, was how many were on stock, how many parts were in stock, and this is how much the price was. You know, think of if you're creating this program for a car dealership, a service department, or something like that, where they have a part number. You know what class that part is in. Maybe that class is if it's a truck, car, service vehicle. You know, however they want to classify it within their database. How many of those are on file, and what the price would be of that part. So as you can see, this does have real world applications. You could filter in any type of data for this. This is basically just reading in data into your C++ file, and then from here you can manipulate the data and then spit it out to another program, or read it out to a different file, or have you. This is just basically getting this tutorial is basically just getting this stuff from this text file into your C++ file. So let me just go ahead and move this off the screen real quick. Take note though that this is parts, and it's actually we click on the properties here. It is a text document, so parts.txt is the file extension. So close that down. So, well, you know what? Let me bring it. So a few things you're going to want to do you're reading in these this data from this file, and you want to be able to contain it somehow. So in C++, you're going to create objects, variables, that type of thing. The way I kind of solved this problem was, let me bring it up again. Oop, not that. Like I said, I'm not going to edit any of this stuff. So this to me was a string object, just because we got a mix of numbers and this dash in here and a letter. So I actually created it as a string object. Excuse me. And what we'll actually do, in order to use a string object, we actually have to include the string header. And then what I did was I created a string variable to read in that part number, and let me bring it over here. So I created a string object to actually read in this part number, and then this was actually this was a character object. I'll create a C++ tutorial on all this. I'm just kind of getting started with this. And then this was actually an integer, because as you can see, it's not a double. We don't actually have a decimal place to worry about here. And then this object, the cost per part, I created this as a double in my project, and that's how I'm going to do it here. So let me get this off the screen. I'm actually looking at my old file here from class and how I kind of did it, how I'm going to recreate it. So to get that part number, it's going to be a string variable, or it'd be actually a string object. And you can name your variables whatever you want. I've always heard make the variable make sense. So it's going to be a part number. And then I'm going to initialize this to, this does to 0 for using C++, anything above C++ 14. You could probably leave it blank like this. It's just good programming practice to initialize that to something, which the default would be 0. The next piece was this let me drag over here. This character, this part class, is the project was called. And this I'm actually going to create as a character, which is in C++ a char, and I called it a part class. The next was, this was the inventory. So this is 123 of this part number. It's a part class C. 123 on hand, and it's $45. So we're going to create this next piece, and that was, I'm going to call it, it's an integer, and it's going to be inventory on hand, initialize to 0. And for here, this is going to be a double, because as you can see, we had decimals there. So this is going to be a double number, and it's going to be double, and it'd be part cost. And then in order to, so in my project, I actually made this as part of a function of opening this file, reading this information, and then manipulating the data and pushing it back out, but we're not going to do that here. Now remember, in order to read in a file, we need this FStream. So we actually need to create an F, air quotation here, an FStream object, and there is something called an output file stream, and you would create the object as, it's kind of like a string where it's an object and we're creating a part number, which is part of the string class. It's a string object called part number. Here it's a FStream object, but we're calling it, we would call, it's some type of object that will do action on data. So you can do an output file stream, and you want to name it something, don't name it something stupid like F, or, you wouldn't know what the hell that was. So, output file data, or I don't know. But in this situation, we're going to be reading stuff into our CPP file. So we want to include an IF stream, which means input file stream. And for this situation, and for this particular text file and everything, I called my input file stream object parts file. So when I was first starting C++, this like blew my mind. When you learn basic C++, this stuff's pretty easy to comprehend. Like, there's different data types, and we call these different data types. These are what's called primitive data types. But then you learn about string part number, and then what you when you're learning about strings, which are like a string could be like, hi, my name is Tyler, or whatever. That could be actually a string. This is a string of characters, but you just kind of learn as like one of your basic stuff when you're doing C++. But what you find out is this is actually an object of a string object, and same thing with this IF stream. And that's why, if you look, Visual Studios has the primitive data types a certain color and these objects a certain color. But anyway, we've created a input file stream object. So what this does, based off this header file, this includes a bunch of stuff that we can't see that's going to work behind the scenes when we compile this. It is saying this allows us to create these input file stream objects, and we can create multiple ones. I can create an input file stream parts file 2, for example. Just like I create multiple strings, you can create multiple of these. We only need one for this object, or this program. But you can create multiple, just like you can create multiple strings. Okay, so we have the parts file is, we've created that input file stream object. So what we're going to do now is actually open the parts.txt. So if you remember, let me bring up my file structure here. That's our parts.txt file. So this is my folder. This is readin file method 1.cpp right here. And it's on this, in this drive, in this file system. And I put the parts.txt file in here with it. So if I drop this parts.file in some other folder, I'd have to create, I'll show you what I'm going to do, but you'd have to create a bunch of directions of where the CPP file would go to figure out where this parts.txt file was to read in the data. But just to make everything simple, I'm not going to do that here. That's why I just dropped the parts.txt file into this folder. So what we're going to do next is create a function. So we're going to do parts file, which is this guy right here, dot open. This is a function, and this is our argument. What's it opening? Parts dot text. Okay. This dot open is a function that's within this FStream class, and we're using our parts file object, parts file, and then we're using that to open a parts.txt. And like I said, the CPP file needs to figure out where the hell this thing is located in your computer. Well, if it was somewhere else, I'd have to, C as on the C drive or something like that, and then put dash, whatever that file structure is. But since it's in our CPP, the same file as our CPP, our CPP file, it's in the same folder as a CPP file. We don't have to put that. So, and this is where I get to the method. There's multiple methods of how to open these. One of the easiest ones is to do a do while loop. And so so the best way to think about this is I'll go ahead and do kind of a control structure of how the program would look at this. So I'm going to do an if-else. It's going to be a do while loop nested with an if-else statement. And I'll show you what that means. We'll go slow. All right, so we're at my if statement. So if parts dash file, if that is true, so we know in C++ this checks to see if it's true. If I put a exclamation point right there, that would say if this is not true. They call it a bang or exclamation point. It just means not. So if not parts file true, it would not. I mean, I'm not getting that logic, but right here, if parts file, if this is true. So in computer world, that means like, can I find this? Does this thing, does it work? If this is true, actually, you know what? I'm gonna back up out of here. I'm not gonna do this. We actually don't need that for this situation. That was something I was using in my class. We could actually just read this in, just on this as a console output. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm actually going to do this in a do while loop. So do, give some spaces to work there, while parts dash file dot good. This is actually a function within that. Make sure that works. This dot good is a function within the FStream library, and it's basically just saying do, and we'll give the computer a bunch of instructions here. Do these instructions while parts.file is good, and this is telling it to read down through this. I'll show you guys. So basically what we're saying is do this stuff that I'm about ready to put in here, these instructions, while this parts file is still reading. So while it's reading in data, it'll still do this. And then once it's out of data, it'll drop out of the do while loop. But we'll go ahead and do this. So what I'm going to do is my parts file, and what we're going to do is read in this information. Part number. Once again, this is, part number is going to be this guy. We're going to read that in. Part class. Inventory on hand. You'll want to IntelliSense already come with Visual Studios. So this will actually read everything in. So what this, if I just leave this as is, it will read all this stuff into the CPP file. But it's kind of like, well, what good does that do? You know, how do I manipulate the data after that? I'll show you that real quick. But what I want to show you real quick is once we get done, so we've opened the file with this command, we read in all this stuff. That's why we created this part number, part class, inventory on hand, part cost. So this parts file has somewhere to read that data into our program. But what we're going to do here is next we're going to hit. You need to actually close the file. Parts file dot close. Once again, this is a function within the FStream library. So if I should be able to go and compile this with no errors. So as you can see, it succeeded. And then we can actually go ahead and run this. So I'll hit Control-Shift F5. Or Control F5. There we go. So it read it quickly. It read in all this data, but it's like, what the hell? Where'd it go? It just read the data in. We didn't tell it what to do with the data. So, but we're gonna do that next. So what we're going to do here is, this is actually, we're getting this from the FStream library. We're going to use cout, which is short for console output. This is C++ is a really old school language. The console output will read, we don't need this parts file was the object we use to read this stuff into our program. The cout is, I don't know why these arrows go this way and cout goes this way. I have no clue why it's set up like that, but anyway. So cout there'll be a console output, and I'll show you what that does in a minute. So we're going to do the part number. We'll give ourselves some space here. Part class. Give ourselves another space. This is actually, the cout's going to read this as empty space. Inventory on hand. Give ourselves some more space. Part cost. Oh yeah, part cost. There we go. And then I'm going to do inline. If I don't do this, I'll show you what it looks like if I don't do that. So let's go ahead and build this and run it. So as you can see, it read in everything from our parts. So we start at 1002, read everything in. So let me show you some output if that doesn't, if I don't put the inline in there, it'll look really stupid. Just a second. So go ahead and close this. Okay. Let's say I don't put this inline in there. I'll show you what it looks like. It'll still C++ is, computers are stupid. They'll do whatever they tell you to as long as you can compile it. But I'll show you what it looks like if we don't do that. Anyway, I'll show you. See, it just ran all the crap together. You're like, what the hell? So that's why, in order to organize our file to where our humans can read, we'll do that inline. So what this is doing is we've created all these. We've created a string object to accept this part number, this character variable to accept this part class, inventory on hand, be an integer, double part cost, all that stuff. Then we had to create an object file, an input file stream object file. What? Okay. All right, sounds good. Yeah, he's right here. It's created this parts file as an input is an object of it's an input file stream object. So this parts file is what we use to manipulate to read in this information to read in this data. And we use the parts file .open, which is a function of the FStream library to open the parts.txt file, which is a file within our C++, where our C++ file is. Okay? And then we're going to use a do-while loop. So what this does, the reason I use a do-while loop is it'll keep reading line by line. So the way the computer, it's saying, oh, do this. Use this parts file to read a part number. Oh, what's a part number? It's a string object. To then read a part class. What the hell is a part class? It's a character. Leave that alone, bud. Go sit down. I'll help you in a minute. Then it's saying, oh, read an inventory on hand. What the hell is that? It's an integer. And then read in a part cost. What is that? It's a double. Okay? So it's reading all this stuff in. It'll keep reading the stuff in. It's like, okay, I've read all this in. What do you want me to do? Oh, you want me to do a console output, and it'll print the part number, part class, and our spaces here. I'll show you what it looks like without spaces. Let's say we take out the spaces. I can do input. Yeah. See, I always like to go in here and play around stuff, break it, see what happens. So if we don't, let's say we take out the spaces, I'll show you what that looks like. So you just read all the crap together. You're like, what? It is. Here you can see the part number there. There's a class, and then there's how much it all runs together. You don't want that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put these spaces. We're gonna tell the console output to include these spaces. There we go. So what's going to happen in the do while loop is going to read our parts. Our parts file is the object that we need. If we don't have this damn thing, then it won't work. Then we're going to read our part number, which is our string, which is this thing. We're going to read in part class, which is this guy. We're reading that in here. And then we're reading in our inventory on hand, which is our integer. And then we're reading our part cost, which is our double. Okay, so we read in the data, and it's like, well, what do we do with data now? Well, then we're telling the C++ file to do a console output, which is that black window. That's just a console window. We're telling it to print the part number, a space, and then I guess I included another space in there for some reason. Then the part class, this guy. Then another space, and the inventory on hand, which is this integer right here, and another space, and then a part cost. And then what we're doing here is we're actually saying end line, and it actually flushes the buffer too, and we will go to a new line, and then it'll come up. We do a console output, and then what happens is the do while just keeps doing this until while parts.file is good. Once it reaches to the bottom of this, I'm scrolling down to here. This will no longer be a true statement. So it'll read down through here, and then it gets to the bottom. There's no more data. This parts file.good will then be a not true value, and then it'll exit the do while loop, and our program will end. So why don't we do it one more time? Visual Studios to build and run is Control F5. And there we go. Read everything in. So this is just one of many methods I've seen. This is kind of, I'm doing a bunch of C++ tutorials just to go over fundamental basics. And what you'll find is the best way is just to watch a bunch of people's tutorials and then try out different stuff and see if it works for you. Think of it being like an apprentice welder. You can watch one guy weld stuff all day, which is great, and he might be a master welder, but you'll also pick up other stuff by apprenticing under other people and watching other master welders work, because then what will happen is you'll find your own kind of technique of doing things, and you can pass that on to the next guy or gal that you're training how to do this stuff. So thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully this was helpful, and like I said, I will do other tutorials in the future. I just want to get one out here today, and I really appreciate your time. Hit the subscribe button if you found this information helpful, and smash the like button. I really appreciate it.